Today on Mondays with Mo, we're going to be taking a look at a game that is very near and dear to my heart. A game that I believe to be one of the greatest arcade racers ever made, and absolutely one of the greatest arcade racers of the last generation. That game is Split Second. Originally released back in 2010 for the Xbox 360, the PlayStation 3, and PC, you could still play Split Second today. It's available digitally via the backwards compatibility program on Xbox. It'll net you $8 if you got gold, $20 if you don't. You can also pick it up digitally on Steam for $20, but keep in mind that it has a 30 FPS lock. The game was never properly ported to PC. You can unlock that frame rate. A lot of people have tried over the years, but it creates a lot of issues with the game's power play system, which is heavily tied into the destructive environments. Unfortunately, as far as I could find out, if you're on PlayStation, you'll just have to go ahead and play the game on PlayStation 3. Really, if you own an Xbox One, you are in like the best possible position to play this game. $8, you could probably get a hard copy cheaper somewhere else, and you can play it just like you would have back in 2010. Now, Split Second was published by Disney, but more importantly, developed by BlackRock Studios, one of many smaller studios that existed in the last generation that did a lot of contract work and occasionally got to create their own masterpieces like Split Second, and 2 years prior to Split Second, a little game called Pure. Some of you might have played Pure. It was a Freak-style-esque ATV experience that was really focused on tricks and speed boosting. Just like Freak-style was back in the day, do a lot of tricks, land big jumps, and go really fast. And just like Split Second, BlackRock's other bespoke creation, it looked amazing, and it sounded amazing, and more importantly, it played amazing. BlackRock made a lot of like contracted, film to game style experiences, just like, oh, make a Hot Wheels game for us. But when they got to work on their own stuff or help work on other projects like MotoGP and the long-running ATV off-road Fury franchise for PlayStation 2, they absolutely crushed it, which is very much why I'm here today talking about Split Second as a game that I have been playing for the last 9 years. This is very much the holiday game that my brother and I play every time he comes over. During the holidays, we sit down, we dive back into our single-player campaign in an attempt to get first place in every single race and event. We hop into split screen. We go through some of our favorite locations with our favorite cars. This game has just not gotten old. So let's talk about why that is. The core gameplay experience of Split Second is actually very deep, very satisfying, and there's a lot to master here. I mean, just the raw driving experience in this game has a lot of depth, and it offers one of the most satisfying and enjoyable to learning curves in an arcade racer that I have ever played. That learning curve is then expanded into the game's 25+ roster of vehicles that all have their own unique handling models and driving characteristics. Some of the cars might be focused on grip and cornering speed with a lot of downforce, while others are built for drift. But even then, no two drift cars are alike. No two grip cars are alike. They have their own ways of handling downforce and cornering speed. They have their own ways of drifting. And as the player, as the driver, you've got to master their own unique styles across those different disciplines to stay fast and to stay in control. For example, some of the drift cars are focused on late drift braking. So the idea that you're going to brake through most of your drift and then power out of the end of it. Some cars are all about powering on during a drift, tapping the throttle to modulate power to control the car through a drift. The same thing said for the grip cars, and one of my favorite things about this game is just the raw handling feels of the cars themselves. Some cars are very weighty and heavy, they lose grip very easily. Some cars are light and nimble with a lot of downforce, making them very grippy. One of the single best small feelings in this game is your car losing traction, your car breaking free of grip, if you will. Every car does this at a different point in a turn, at different speeds, with different momentums. And so figuring out where that is and how to utilize that to either keep a car glued to the track in some corners or to let it loose and to pull that drift nice and clean through the corner is a huge part of the driving experience in this game. And as you go through the different car classes and they get a little bit faster, a little bit more unique in how they handle different play styles and different elements throughout the game's many tracks, the more deep the game gets and the more there is for you to learn. Unlocking a new car in this game is kind of unlike unlocking an entire new class in an RPG. There's a whole layer of mastery for you to dive into to really make the most of that car and to perform as best as you can. And not all of the cars are great for every situation or for every play style. For example, one of the race types available in Split Second requires you to chase down a helicopter that is shooting missiles at you, and you then have to generate power play meter to deflect those missiles back. So you want something that's going to allow you to go fast, but also drift a lot and drift fast to gain meter. So you don't want a really grip-oriented car here. And that's going to be the case for a lot of the other events and race types. You might find a car with a certain handling style that works best for the situation, but also for your play style. It makes for a very replayable experience and a very satisfying one at that, because not only does this game feel good, it sounds incredible. The different cars have their own unique, exhaust notes. And that's one thing that a lot of, not even arcade racers get wrong, right? Is the cars just don't sound that good. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about arcade racers, is that in a lot of ways, they can just make cars that sound better than regular cars because they don't have to adhere to, this is what this car actually sounds like and re-record it. They just go all out and make growly, spiky, shrill audio design for the different car engines and the exhaust notes. And, it's such a beautiful part of Split Second. Now, they also have a handful of SUV-style vehicles. They're not personally my favorite, but I want to talk about them because they're more resistant to power plays, which we'll talk about in a moment. This is a great way for new players to make their way into Split Second, especially if they find themselves struggling just to survive a race, let alone actually make it to the front of the pack in that race. So, let's talk power plays, because this is where Split Second kind of comes into its own. This is an arcade racer that just so happens to have a great set of handling models for its car. It just so happens to have a really great core driving experience, but its selling point is the power plays and the destruction in the world of Split Second, which is this crazy sort of competitive reality TV show. As you make your way through a track, drifting, drafting, jumping, and in general driving with style and speed, you're rewarded meter for your power play meter. This allows you to activate key points on the track called power plays that create moments of destruction to slow down or even take out other racers entirely. It might be something as simple as a car exploding, part of a bridge collapsing, and they get a lot crazier, but we'll talk about that in a moment. These power plays are a big part of the strategy layer of Split Second. This isn't an RNG focused arcade racer. It's not like a kart racer with random pickups or even a game like Blur with its random power-ups. It's all about speed and driving performance and knowledge of the track and the power plays. When to deploy a power play to give you the best chance of knocking out an opponent, whether it's a player or an AI. When to activate a power play to ensure that you don't also get caught up in the thick of it. And of course, the endless strategy of actually dodging power plays from the AI themselves, making sure that you position yourself as best as you possibly can when you know there's a high chance of a power play being activated by a driver behind you. A lot of these you can beat out with speed or dodge with timing or a drift, and some of them, well, the timing's right and you get taken out, but that's where the beauty of this game's balance comes into play. Power plays and takedowns in this game aren't meant to put you all the way in last place, so far behind you'll never catch up. In a lot of ways, Split Second has a natural catch-up mechanic in that it gets you back into the race very quickly, and power plays aren't meant to be devastating to your performance on the track. Don't get me wrong, get hit by 3 or 4 power plays in what is only a 2 or 3 lap race, and the chances of you making a comeback are going to be harder and harder and harder, but you could also use those power plays to your advantage to try and make that comeback. It makes for a very balanced, more skill-based experience than a lot of other arcade racers on the market. While the catch-up and respawning mechanic isn't perfect, and sometimes you'll be put a little bit too close back into the race, it works the majority of the time. And for all of the years I've been playing this game, going up against the automatic difficulty tuned AI in the campaign and playing in split screen with my brother has always netted a lot of races that are ridiculously close and down to the wire, and that's where this game is at its best. Now, something special happens when you hit a tier 3 power play meter and you actually activate it. You can use it to activate a route swap, which actually creates a new route by destroying the old route in a catastrophic explosion. These new routes also have their own low, level 1 tier power plays you can activate. They're also usually a little bit more complex, a little bit more chaotic, and anyone who was on the old route could potentially be destroyed by the activation of your route swap. You can also use those tier 3s for tier 3 power plays, which are huge, massive, like made-for-TV destructive set pieces. And one of my favorite ones is one that can only be accessed after you do a route swap on the airport racetrack. It's a plane crashing into the runway, which is now the new route. It is insane, and there are so many more over-the-top ones like this, including one of my other personal favorites, a boat that actually drops off of its mounts on the dry dock and slides into the water. They're super crazy, they're a lot of fun, and even if you get caught up and blasted by them, they are just like sort of a marvel to look at. You're like, oh, that was so cool. And again, there's still a chance for you to make some sort of a comeback. At the end of the day, the core experience that is Split Second is ridiculously strong, and it's actually also a fairly content-rich game. The single-player campaign is pretty long, and every single one of the races and the alternative events in the game are built in a sort of time attack way. You know, if you're not looking to just get first place in a race, say you're doing something like the semi-truck barrel event where you are trying to pass semi-trucks while they drop explosive barrels, you're trying to get like the best time, the best performance. Everything in this game harkens back to that core ideology of make the player drive as good as they can. The most precise driving, you know, the most aggressive, the most stylistic driving. The game just always wants you to push to drive as fine of a line as you possibly can, as best as you possibly can. There's not a whole lot going on here where it's just like RNG or like, oh, you know, don't worry about it. This is like all based on how many things you can kill or how many people you can take down. It's almost always just about being as fast as you can, and I think in this case that works really well for the variety of game modes that exist throughout the experience. Again, you can play the single player campaign. I like to play it on the couch, passing the controller. I think this game works really well in that regard. Split screen lets you play through any of the tracks and cars you have unlocked, and you can also just do quick play, which also has a difficulty selection, which is great if you feel like you're struggling a little bit in the single player campaign and you want to spend some time practicing with one specific car or one specific race type. I cannot recommend Split Second enough, guys. Like, in an age where we don't get a lot of good, like, pass the controller, couch co-op, couch competitive style experiences, especially in the realm of the arcade racer, Split Second still kicks so much ass. And while, yeah, it's a bit grainy, even on the Xbox One X these days, you don't really care about that after about 5 or 10 minutes of hooning one of your favorite cars into a corner and, you know, activating a shortcut while dropping a tier 3 power play on your buddy's face. If you decide to pick up Split Second and you end up playing it, I'd love to hear what your experience was like down in the comment section below. Of course, if this is one of your favorite arcade racers from the last generation, feel free to leave your thoughts and share some of your favorite things about Split Second down in the comment section below. I'm going to be looking to revisit a lot of these classic arcade racers over the next year through Mondays with Mo. We'll be taking a look at things like Blur and MotorStorm and Pure and a whole lot more. Thank you guys so much for watching. A huge shout out, as always, to everybody over on Patreon helping me make awesome videos like this. If you'd like to become a Patreon, you can click the link down in the description below. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.
Forward. You have been brought here for a purpose, the most important task of your lives.